Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Slingshot from levees.org. You all know me, Sandy Rosenthal, and joining me today is Mr. Stuart Lob, and also from the great state of California, specifically San Francisco, is Ms. Molly Horton. Hello, Molly. Hello, Stuart.
Hello.
Hey, Sandy.
I'm really excited about today's conversation because it's something that's going on in every state of the nation, and that is utilization of public space and how there are many, many different opinions on exactly how to do that. To start off the discussion, we're going to talk about something called Prop K in San Francisco, and that was a decision that was made recently, of just a couple of months ago in San Francisco, to convert a much used highway and convert it into park space for pedestrians and bicyclists. And this is along the shore of San Francisco and the Pacific Ocean, near the sunset areas of the neighborhoods of San Francisco. So we all have connections to San Francisco, all of us here. I have a daughter and a son in San Francisco, and I travel there a good bit. Molly Horton lives there full time, and Stuart has a niece who lives that, who is Molly. So we're going to start with Stuart in talking about Prop K and what that means, not just for San Franciscans, but for everyone in the nation.
Yeah, well, Prop K, it was an unfamiliar issue to me being a New Orleanian, but it resonated because, we're facing that issue with some of our infrastructure here. We have an interstate that was almost a classic Robert Moses come through with the bulldozers through the poor neighborhood, tear out all the oak trees and build an elevated expressway, just as he did in the 40s and 50s in New York, came in the early 60s in New Orleans and built the Interstate 10 complex that runs in from the Industrial Canal into downtown. And now that structure is facing a $52 million repair bill, and the city, or there are those in the city who are considering whether it would be a good idea to follow Boston's lead with the big dig and take down the elevated expressway and replace it. Now, unfortunately, in New Orleans, you wouldn't be able to go underground feasibly with a tunnel of that length. So in this case, they would just revert back to surface streets and try to restore what the neighborhood was like back then. So that's the issue here in New Orleans. In San Francisco, this was a thoroughfare that effectively separated the beach from the neighborhood, created a high-speed traffic corridor so that if anyone from the Sunset wanted to go across the beach, you had to go to a designated crossing, and there's safety issues with that. And Molly can speak more to the specific issues of what traffic patterns would be affected if it was taken away. But this is an issue that faces us today, and it has faced cities in the past. New Orleans at one point once considered having a riverfront expressway that went right past the Jackson Square in the French Quarter, and that was famously shut down in 1967 through a grassroots campaign. And the origin of that dates back to the demolition of Penn Station in New York City. That kind of spurred the creation of the Carré Commission, and then they got behind opposing that.
Well, thank
So
heaven that that was shot
yeah,
down.
right. And so this could be a portent for San Francisco, that maybe you could create something really nice, or maybe this is uh, maybe they should have left it as is because it was an essential traffic thoroughfare.
Well, I
Uh,
think it's a good time to segue to Molly, who lives there, and I'm sure I would bet money, and I don't gamble, that Molly's heard different sides of this issue. Have you, Molly?
Yeah, very much. So I am I did not campaign for the issue. I was not as emphatic, beyond that I am very interested in local elections and my family, as my family uses it. We are a biking family. My husband's a bike commuter, and we live in the Sunset. So we were sort of naively thinking it was a great idea for everyone. And yeah, definitely let's vote for this. Let's have another park. And and I very quickly found out that neighbors who I respect, who I often align with, on political issues, uh, had very different opinions. And, in talking to friends about voting, many split households. So, one partner was voting yes, one partner was voting no, whereas I think typically in our political landscape, maybe a little less with local, but still in general, you have sort of household alliances, at least in what I think of as the bubble of San Francisco.
That's fair.
Yeah. So I guess the qualifier that I want to give on this is that I do live in the Sunset. But if you know the landscape of the area, you've got the Pacific Ocean, and then you've got the Great Highway, which is what we're talking about, Prop K, specifically 2 miles of the Great Highway that go from a street called Judah all the way down to Sloat. And I live right in the middle of that. I live at Kirkham at Lawton. And so it is, my house is along Great Highway, but there are three major thoroughfares in the Sunset. There's Great Highway, then there's Sunset Boulevard, which replaces 36th Avenue, and then there's 19th Avenue. I live between 19th and 36th. So again, qualifying my opinion, I live between the other two thoroughfares. And so my neighbors who may be listening and thinking, but what does she know? I'm just, stating where I come from. So I do know that there are people who live much closer to the Great Highway and feel that 36th, the Great Highway would replace its past 48th. So we're talking about basically the 30 blocks of the Sunset here. I just wanted to let people know that.
This is a podcast, so you really can't show us anything, but can you talk to us about who in San Francisco voted for us and who against us, if you were to show us a map?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things at play here. So the map that I pulled up, and you can't see because it's a podcast, but you have to think of San Francisco almost looks like a upside down U, or the letter N. If you think of, on a very simplistic level, the letter N, and the Great Highway is all along the straight line of that lowercase n. And so my house is about 20 blocks in from that straight line at the left side of the lowercase n. So that map of San Francisco has, I was showing a map where it shows who voted for and against, and it's completely separated, right? There's no purple is for and purple is against and green is for. There's no overlap. Once you hit the line purple on the left side of the map along that straight line of the N, it was like solid purple from top to bottom. And it actually almost makes an L. So you've got solid purple from top to bottom and along the bottom, which is actually kind of the more affordable areas of San Francisco. And then you've got the whole top right, bendy part of the N on the right side was all green. And like I said, there was no back and forth. It was just like a mound of green and then an L of purple.
Which is really interesting.
You have to look up the map to really understand it, but I hope I verbally described it.
To our listeners, it's an easily accessible map. But it's not surprising. Can I insert something real quickly, Molly?
Please.
So this people sometimes get the feeling, if let's say you live near a park, okay? And people who live near a park tend to get the wrong impression or idea that their voice matters more, that they have more say in what happens at this public park, no matter what it is, whether it be the public park's lighting or the public park's music, and people who live near the park think they should have a greater weight because they live near it. It's public. If it doesn't matter if you live next to the park or you live 20 miles from the park, everybody has the same voice. But I'm going to go back to you, Molly, because that may be the case, but that doesn't also make things happen.
If people are interested, you just type into search engine election map SF November 2024, and you'd see it. But so the no, which is the L that runs the residents who live in the precincts and districts that are right down alongside of the ocean, had 45% of the vote, and it passed with 55% of the vote. Mm-hmm. And all of those people sort of living more away from Ocean Beach. Now, I very much live in a purple area, sort of right in the middle, that voted no. But for my family, I have children. I have a very heavily bike enthusiast husband. This all started during COVID. Great Highway was closed for like events occasionally, but when the parks shut down, when we live right next to a playground that was chained for months, and I had small children at that time, like three toddlers, Great
Wow.
Highway closed. And it was a godsend. It was a godsend.
Yeah.
And it was just so great to be able to go there and bike, and nobody was going to work anyway. And it was so popular at that time because it was such a unique time in history,
Yes.
honestly.
Yes.
We were all working from home and trying to like literally run our children during our lunch break. It was great. And I don't know, apparently my view is not everyone's view. I feel like everyone loved it. As the world opened back up, it became more controversial for people trying to get to and from work. My
Hmm.
husband has a good friend who works at the electric, one of the few people who actually works on Great Highway. He lives in Marin himself and does the electrical contract for the water plant, the treatment plant that's right there by the ocean. And for him, he thinks it's a royal pain.
Oh, yes.
But
It it's the road that I use to bring my grandson and granddaughter to the zoo, and I will
yes.
miss it when it's closed. But I have a question to you about closing it. So, don't they have to shut down the highway anyway because of all the sand dunes have literally moved onto the highway? So, Molly, since you live there, I'm sure you have a lot better idea than I do. I'm only there part time. When they need to close the Great Highway to move the dunes, literally, how long is the Great Highway shut down?
So it's pretty seasonal, right? It's when we get our big wins, that come in, and it will be closed. Well, first of all, I don't think it's super well publicized. So you'll get like I don't always. It's not like the Great Highway is closed for months. It's like you are going to the zoo or you're
Yeah,
going
only
somewhere
you
and
would
you get
know.
there,
Uh-huh.
and the
Right.
what do you call that? The thing that comes down like the gate, it already existed before this Prop K came up, before they closed it during COVID, because a lot of times they just swing the gate closed. There's too much sand on the road
Too
to
much
take.
sand on the road.
So that gate already existed, and it will close for like, and be honest, like it's not something we even talk about. It's just like, oh, Great Highway's closed
But they
today.
but
So
they close it.
it,
There's no denying it has to get closed. Okay.
it does.
And
And they
I
are actually fully closing the lower
can't,
half of Great Highway.
right. And
Not
there's no
permanently.
way it's a
That
couple of
was not the
hours.
plan.
There's
So,
no
so
because
Great Highway, we're talking about the 2 mile stretch of Great Highway
mhm.
that runs adjacent to like the top from the bottom of Golden Gate Park all the way to the zoo to Sloat. But past that, you would not be able to continue on the Great Highway because they are closing it because it was not environmentally feasible to keep it running. So the idea of driving all the way down the side of San Francisco, that was going away anyway.
And that was
Um,
independent of the proposal.
Yes. And so once that part was closing the bottom of the Great Highway, then they're like, let's just close the whole Great Highway. The other thing that's important to know is you can't enter the Great Highway, this stretch of the Great Highway. There's only two places you can enter it. And then it's like a solid median with like a raised boardwalk type thing. So at the bottom of the stretch, which is Judah, at the top of the stretch, which is Sloat. But once you get on that, there's no left turn, there's no right turn. It's literally solid land, which I think as a commuter you probably like. There's stoplights so you can cross, but as a commuter, I imagine people like that. Once you get on it, you're on it. So it was pretty much exclusive use for commuting.
I guess where I was going with this, Molly, is that it looked to me inevitable that this was going to happen. If not this year, maybe next year. But I really believe with erosion continuing that this had to happen. And why just put it off? They can't tell me it's not expensive to move the dunes off the Great Highway.
No, I mean,
It's
or
terribly
to pour
expensive.
money into this mitigation effort
It's
that
major construction. I mean, it's insanely expensive. Sand is heavy. Okay, wet sand is heavy. So, in my mind, this was inevitable, and it certainly sounded to me like this was a lot of people who were unable to accept what's coming anyway, and it's going on all over the world. It's not just it's not San Francisco doesn't have a monopoly on not accepting what's coming, and then we need to do something now, not wait. But that's all I was what I was going with it. Stuart, you've been quiet.
Well, I was just thinking about all the other places where there's beachfront territory where they're in some in a minority of areas, they're spending enormous sums trying to preserve beachfront property for people whose homes impinge right on the water. They're right on the edge of the water, and you're building breakwaters, putting sandbars out, dropping riffraff hundreds of yards offshore to try to rebuild or preserve beaches that exist.
I think you meant
And
rap.
riprap, yeah. What did I say?
Riff-raff.
Riprap. Okay, yeah, riprap, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
that riff-raff. You got anyway. Go on.
yeah,
I'm
let's
sorry.
stump all the riffraff out there. That's our governor might be happy with that. No, it's the riprap that they put out there,
Right.
and it's enormously expensive. And Louisiana has an example in Grand Isle, which is an historic island, but it's a barrier island that is geologically doomed to go away with the changes in the Mississippi River's course. So they've been doing heroic efforts to try to preserve it,
And expensive.
and it's heroically expensive. It is.
Let for just a moment, other places in the world, not to hop on them forever, but there's Boston's Big Dig, and what is less well known is Providence. At one point, the Black River went right through the middle of the Providence central area, the central district where the dome is. They have a dome there, and where the downtown is. Beautiful area. Well, it is now, but it used to be the Blackstone River was completely covered up. And they had the idea about 25, 30 years ago to uncover the Blackstone River, and which they did. And there's beautiful bridges going over it, and the river is now part of the downtown of Providence. And so that was something that was absolutely like going back to nature. I'm really surprised they pulled that off and got that done. But things like this are going on all over the United States. But it is difficult. It does take years just to get permission. I thought it was interesting that after Prop K was passed, which in my mind it's a done deal, the media made it look like it was still an issue, an ongoing issue. But that's the media. No, it's done. It's going to happen. Isn't that right, Molly?
Very much. And I apologize for the noise in the background. I'm at a school. I'm working at a school right now. And so there's a student there who's unhappy. But it is, yeah, the vote has passed and it's done. We have a supervisor, our District 4 supervisor that represents that whole big purple swath of the sunset that voted no, supported the initiative. And there are also some interesting, very local politics in San Francisco in terms of demographics and subgroups that are represented. This supervisor is not, he's a white man. He's not from the predominantly Asian Sunset. I'm going to go off for a minute. I don't know if, can you hear my background noise?
Yeah, a little
No,
bit of
faintly.
music, it sounded like.
Okay, great. Well, then
Yeah,
I won't,
yeah.
won't worry where you could hear it.
Devices
And
today are
so-
working very well to minimize background noise, so we're good.
Fabulous. Great. I'm glad to hear it. So he is generally well received in the sense that he was not up for re-election this round, and he will be next round. But there is an effort from District 4 residents to recall him on a single issue that he supported the Prop K. So while Prop K, which is the closing of the Great Highway and the making of a park, while Prop K is not continue, that's not up for debate. It happened. It's closing. The plans for the park are forthcoming. But right now, just it is open on the weekdays, and then on the weekends it's a park, and that's when my family uses it. But they still need to do all the sand clearing to maintain it, to have it open during the week. And so that is happening. But our supervisor, Joel, is now facing this recall because people are saying they're very upset and he did not listen. And it's just very surprising to me because in my sort of group, my kids go to the local public school there in District 4 in the Sunset. I'm a part of a community of people. We bike our kids to school, we walk to school, my kids walk home, they take the N, we do public. Like, that's very much the mindset of my family. And again, you can't see me on the podcast, but I'm white presenting, I identify as white. The Sunset is well, historically Irish, but most recently it is a predominantly Asian neighborhood. And I find it really interesting. It not exclusively. I have many sort of. I have my two doors now are two women. My neighbors. They are both Asian and pro Prop K, and I know families that are both identify as white, and one is for, one is against. But in general, it is. I have learned. I have come to learn that there's also a in this recall effort, there is an idea of being in touch with the constituents who represent the people who live right there next to the beach. So while it is happening, it is definitely still being discussed and still kind of a hotbed issue. So now you have signs of don't recall Joel or recall Joel.
So, no, I understand they're mad, and there's a lot of not in my backyard, and I understand all that, and it can be worse with the people that have lived in one place the longest. And I already mentioned once in this show that people want things to stay the way they are. They're unwilling to accept what's coming and the things that are inevitable. So I understand that. But truly, I agree with you, Molly. The idea of recalling the supervisor because of one issue alone is ridiculous, for lack of a better word. And what evidence do they have that he didn't attempt with every fiber of his being to represent them and fight this? I mean, to your knowledge, what was his stance on it? To your
Well,
knowledge,
he supported it. He endorsed Prop K,
okay, okay.
and it has come down to almost like a social litmus test of like, do you like it is a more you said not in my backyard, which is funny because this is actually a park, right? We're not putting in a highway,
Hmm.
as Uncle Stuart said, or Stuart, I suppose, on this podcast, said through, a neighborhood. There is a highway through the neighborhood, and we're trying to put a park in. So it's like a funny shift that
Yeah.
the cultural points really aren't they're not irrelevant in this. And so if you have a supervisor that they're saying you are not culturally aligned because you are valuing this nature, like free space and parks, and as you were saying, Sandy, like the ocean is coming, this is what's inevitably going to happen, and that is not the tone or tenor of the majority of the constituency. I went through on the same election website, clicking through other websites. San Francisco, notoriously liberal city. It's like it we still all vote very liberal, but it's how liberal. And I think the thing is that the Sunset is known for being one of the more conservative neighborhoods. And I think that Joel is one of our more liberal supervisors. So Gordon Marr, our last supervisor, we have been edging more liberal, but the gentrification of the Sunset is very much so families like mine coming in and replacing multi-generational households who are mostly coming Cantonese speaking Chinese, because those are the families who had lived in this area. And so I think it is a single issue recall, and in the mind of the recall campaign, demonstrative of the values of the supervisor being of this like San Francisco, take it all, make it all natural land, everybody bikes, they're taking away our cars. So
My son, by the way, speaking of which, lives in a Sunset and does not own a car, and neither does his fiance. They do not own a car, and they make it work. I have been living in San Francisco for 10 years now, part time, and I have not once driven a car. So it's a cool city in that you don't have to have a car. Oh, is it nice to have one? Yeah, but you can live in San Francisco without a car and do just fine. And oh, by the way, Molly, a quick segue. Are you enjoying using Waymos?
so funny story on
Okay.
last Saturday, has directly related to this. Last Saturday,
Uh-huh.
I showed you all there was this event at the beach where this sand artist does sort of sand in the beach. And we live right by the N Judah, which is the public transportation line that runs down Judah, which is the beginning of the closure of um, the highway for like that's right in there, sort of where it's closed. Actually, it's closed at Lincoln, but Judah is like right in there. Um, and we ended up having to walk a mile down the beach to get to this sand art event we were going to. And so on the way home, I said to my kids, we can take we can walk back to the end a mile on the beach, or we can walk on the Great Highway, which is closed. That'll be easier. Walking the highway is easier, or we could take a Waymo home. What do you
Okay.
think my kids chose?
The Waymo. So,
So
so let me ask you, how old are your kids?
my kids are 6 and 9.
And they allowed the 6-year-old in it.
Yeah, we have what's called a bubble bum, which is an inflatable car seat that I just keep in my backpack
Oh, okay.
because we
Okay.
often try and take public transportation but if we're going to an event, we'll take public there and then he's all breaking down on the way home. So I just have a little blow up car seat and as
I
long as you
love
have a car
it.
seat, but you can bring an infant as long as you have
These
the proper car seat.
these new car seats are amazing, but that's a story for another show. But back to the Waymo, for our listeners may not be aware, but Waymo has a rule: no one under the age of 8 can go in those. But I didn't know about I guess it's without a car seat.
It's
And so
without, yes, and we
so
have made that
one
mistake
day
and they will call you on the thing and
they
pull over.
will. Well,
Yeah.
if I can share my episode. So I climbed in with my 8-year-old granddaughter, and all of a sudden, a human voice says, "Excuse me, Mr. and Mrs. Rosenthal, we see you have a child with you." Yes. And how old is she? And she's 8. I said, "Oh, okay. You all have a wonderful ride." It is kind of a funny experience. But I love Waymos. I love them, love them, love them. I feel way more safe. I don't know if that's the whole point of Waymo, but I feel more safe in a Waymo than with a human driver. But so that's my piece. And Waymos are coming to every state in the nation. This is just a matter of time. But anyway, back to the conversation, Stuart. I know you've been really excited about this show because I know you wanted to talk about these sorts of issues, like what's going on in San Francisco. Are you aware of any others that are ongoing right now or recently happened in the country?
No, other than our own local issue with Claiborne Avenue and the interstate, uh, there are
I've got another
others.
one. I've got another one, Stuart. You talked about this. I knew it. What there has been talk about closing off the French Quarter completely to cars.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's another one. I knew there was another one. So what do you think about that, Stuart?
Well, that's a logistically difficult thing to do with the French Quarter still has, functioning commercial entities that require deliveries, and you would have to close it to everything but commercial traffic. And that if it's not a grassed over, totally pedestrian space, then you have enforcement and regulation. You'd have to enforce boundaries so that only commercial vehicles get in and do commercial things within the quarter. And I have mixed feelings about it. It would be difficult. It would make like life more difficult for locals to get in and go do things in the quarter because we can't really rely on our public transportation. And the streetcar the other day was like an hour and a half delay, and we were going to see a show at La Petite, and that wasn't going to work. So, we ended up driving down and parking. There was when I was in college at Tulane in 1979. At that time, Audubon Park was open from St. Charles around to Hearst Street. It's the street that cuts off to the right that goes past Audubon Charter School. That along that arc there was parking, and so when I was a student, and I was a commuter student, I used to park over there. And then it was announced, it was in Ron Foreman's early days. He was the director of the park from then until just recently. He
Mm-hmm.
had a very long tenure as the director of
Mm-hmm.
Audubon Park.
Mm-hmm.
They closed that and we're going to seal off St. Charles Avenue. And I was adamantly against it because I was a commuter who took advantage of parking in Audubon Park and walking to class. And I even arranged a meeting with the provost of Tulane, with the director of Audubon Park, and we tried to hash it out to where they could keep it open. And they had decided no, they need to close it to make it a more to just eliminate all vehicles from the park. And in retrospect, they were right. It's so much more pleasant to have the ring road that goes around where the Swan Boat Lake is, that to have no vehicle traffic other than the security guy that comes around every few minutes.
So the
positive.
organizers actually did have a good idea that time.
They had a good idea, and I acknowledge that now. It took me about, and I not have acknowledged that for quite some time. It was about 5 years later. I think I wasn't even out of college yet that I realized, oh, this was the right thing to do. The park is much nicer without these cars coming in and parking on the side there between St. Charles and Magazine Street. So,
Well, I'm glad we have that good story close to the end of our show. There is
okay.
some good things happening out there. Molly, I know you've got to get back to work. I know you work you're the administrator for a school in San Francisco. Is that right,
Correct. Yeah.
Molly? So I
Can you
know
hear
you've
me?
got 1,000 things to do. I know you have 1,000 things to do. So is there anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
Well, no, I mean, I hope the story ends like Stuart says, and that has always been before I started researching the issue. That was sort of my assumption, like how lovely, we'll have this right by the beach, and I think it's just incumbent on the city to make the updates on 36th Sunset Boulevard. Right, if they put the infrastructure in, if they, I don't even know, I'm not a big infrastructure person, so I'm not sure what you do to mitigate this, traffic. It's definitely a value add to the neighborhood. But we just need to balance that out. And then I hope in a few years, somebody else talks about some issue and says, do you remember when Great Highway was controversial? And it will seem like a ridiculous thing.
And I bet they're going to say, you know what, that was a good idea. Even the people that were against it at the time. Wouldn't that be just amazing?
They say the arc of the arc of the universe points towards justice. So
Yes,
hope you're on that path,
But
making steps
slowly.
in the right direction.
yes, it does. So, and Stuart, any last comment before we sign off?
Sure, I just wanted to add, I would like to step back, take like a 30,000 foot view of this issue and consider how so many of our issues now are so polarizing. You have these purified blocks of oppositional forces, and here's one where maybe a compromise, or if not a compromise, understanding between one side and the other could develop. And it just would be nice. We should work towards that on so many of the other issues that are so divisive right now.
Stuart, that's great. That's great. Thank you for saying that. You're absolutely right. And even if people don't feel it, they in their heart, they know it in their head that's what they should be doing. So thank you, Stuart Lob, so much for joining me today. Thank you, Molly Horton. By the way, Loeb and Horton, doesn't that sound like the name of a China company, a Chinese
So my
pottery
name
company?
it is not my Zoom name, but I am Molly Horton. So
Oh,
there you go.
okay. Okay. But I still thought it was like the sounded like a law firm Loeb and Horton has a nice ring to it. Or Horton and Loeb.
Let's open one
I
up,
like
Molly.
that
We should
even
go into
I like
business,
that
Uncle
even more.
Sport.
Right.
So well, thank you both for joining me, and thank you all, the listeners, for joining us on this episode of the Slingshot from levees.org. Please come back and join us soon. Thank you. Bye-bye. So y'all stay just a second. I'm just going to stop recording.